All right, it's time to rock today's podcast. Welcome to the CXM Experience. And I am Grad Conn, CXO at Sprinklr, and I'm here to talk about Customer Experience Management, CXM. All right, so in yesterday's podcast, we talked about this idea that there's a system for being highly connected to customers, a customer-centric approach, if you'll have it, to digital transformation. And we call that listen, learn, and love. And yesterday we talked about listen. Listen being, how do you find out what people are saying across all the modern channels? And modern channels are everything that's been invented in the 21st century. So those are social platforms, things like Twitter and Facebook. Those are going to be messaging platforms like WhatsApp and WeChat. It's going to be things like blogs, of which there are millions, and forums, of which there are hundreds of thousands, and review sites, of which there are thousands. And you need to pull in all that information from all those places to really understand what's going on out there. What's amazing is there are more than 4 billion people now actively using social media. And the usage of social media has increased rapidly over the last few months in 2020. I don't know why, but I can't imagine what's happening. But anyway, so something's happened to cause people to increase their usage by double digits. And so what that means is most people who are online are also reachable across these platforms and is their primary way of communicating and interacting. And so the result is, if you're not on those platforms, if you're not in those places, then you're not going to be where your customers are. And the result will be you won't know what your customers are thinking, and they won't be able to see what you're selling. So that's kind of listen in a nutshell. So let's talk about learn. So all that stuff that's coming across these platforms is unstructured and unsolicited. And what that means is that no one's asked for it, which is great, because that means it's really unbiased. If I ask you to review me, if I ask you to give me feedback, I'm immediately biased the system. This is something known as the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. It comes from quantum mechanics, that the act of measuring a system is also an act of altering the system. Now, if I just watch someone write something down that they wrote down on their own because they wanted to, because they were talking to friends, or because they had some passion, that's something I can really trust. Now, there are millions of these conversations going on. In fact, there are billions of these conversations going on. The data store in Sprinklr is 16 petabytes. If you can even imagine how much data that is. So the average human can't really process that. In fact, I was on a really great group today. We had our advertising agency council meeting today at Sprinklr. It was a great meeting. Representatives from many of the world's biggest and greatest agencies, all talking about how they're using Sprinklr to collaborate with clients and run advertising and do a bunch of other very interesting things in the marketplace. And one of the people commented, and she said, they're seeing a lot of comments on ads. So ads themselves get a lot of comments on them, and they need to track those because those comments are not always complementary to the ad. Sometimes the comments will unsell what the ad is selling, and the compliments, and sometimes they're compliments, and sometimes they say things that are great. But to track it all and to sort of stay on top of it all is almost overwhelming. There's thousands and thousands of comments across thousands and thousands of ads. It's really hard. So what do you do? And this is where Sprinklr, I think, become incredibly powerful, because what Sprinklr said about 6 years ago, it became pretty obvious that the volume of information was quickly overwhelming community managers and human beings. And so the only way to solve it would be with artificial intelligence. And so the AI work that started many years ago is now a dominant part of what we do in R&D. We have thousands of people who are using the product every day and training it. We've got, petabytes of information that are part of the data set that make it more intelligent. And we've got a sophisticated set of PhDs and academic institutions we work with on algorithms. And there are algorithms that sit across 90 languages now, and about 40 different categories. So if you're in financial services, you can get a really precise view of it. It's important to have it by category because things don't mean the same in different categories. One of our clients, for example, is the Mayo Clinic. And the Mayo Clinic, the word sick, S-I-C-K, the word sick has a very specific meaning. an important one. Another one of our clients is Red Bull, great brand. In Red Bull context, sick, dude, is very, very, very different context. And so you need to be able to know that sick is cool for Red Bull and bad for Mayo Clinic. And so, it just goes on. Another one of our large clients is Microsoft, and Microsoft has got some really challenging brand names. Surface, Word, Excel's pretty good, so that's not too hard. But Windows. These are really tricky things to separate out. And so being able to use artificial intelligence to understand the words that are adjacent to that, so that you can understand that when someone says Word in a Microsoft context, that they're actually talking about Word, the program, and not just words or something else. So AI has become the way that you learn. And we actually have 7 different AI layers and filters that we process everything through. We've got a great AI webinar series hosted by yours truly. And it's got engineers from across Sprinklr talking about how they've implemented different features with AI. It's a 6-part series. The links are in the show notes, so take a look. I'd encourage you to watch it. You'll learn a lot about AI and machine learning, and you'll also learn a lot about Sprinklr and how we're doing it. And AI does all sorts of things that are in addition to just listening, right? So the one of my favorite ones is smart budgeting. So what it'll do is it actually will look at the way money is being spent and then optimize it on the fly and allocate it correctly to the right advertising channel based on what's happening from a reaction standpoint. So, all that kind of stuff is just really hard for humans to do in real time, and it allows people to optimize campaigns in a really compelling way. What else can you do and learn? Well, the other things that are kind of, I think, fascinating is you can get a pretty good idea of what your brand's all about. Your brand, there's sort of 2 ways of thinking about brand. Brand is what I want it to be. So our brand is what we say our values are. Our brand is what we have written down or etched in stone or put into decks or whatever we have. The other way of thinking about brand, maybe the way I think about brand is what other people say about you. Because no matter what you've put down, if other people don't say it, it's not your brand. Your brand is what others say about you. And the great thing about what we've got going on in Listen is we can now find out what everybody is saying about you, or about your CEO, or about your brand, or about your people, about your product, etc. And so one thing that I rely on heavily in Sprinklr is the AI-based brand attributes. And I can see what sentiment looks like. I can see what kind of core attributes of my brand are. I can benchmark against other products in my categories or other areas. I can see word clouds of what people say about it. I can look at all sorts of different ways of understanding the brand and understanding what's going on, and then take action, and it aggregates it up. And then, of course, the great thing about Sprinklr is if I see something in a chart that says, for example, one of our core brand sentiments is innovation. So not that surprising, but I can click on innovation and drill in and understand, who said that and how they said it and what context it appears. And if I want to, although there's a lot of them, I can get down to individual messages. So all the individual messages are still there, but then they're rolled up with AI. And AI essentially dynamically organizes the comments into categories and attributes. The other thing that I rely on heavily is that I can see which posts and which ads people are responding to, clicking on, sharing, etc. And then I can also see what I'm putting out there. What I find really interesting, and we go through this every week, is kind of typically the stuff that's getting the greatest reactions is not the majority of things that we're sending out there. So we'll send out things that majority say have hopefulness as being a core attribute. But what's actually happening is people are clicking on things that have got feminism was a really big topic a couple weeks ago. So feminist bent, it was a really important part of what people were clicking on. And so what we can do in the team is say, hey, people are clicking on this type. We should route it more. And people aren't clicking on these other ones that we're doing a lot of, so let's do less of them. So that's learn. So we're going to come back to love tomorrow, and love is many splendid things, so we'll be able to talk about that at length. I'll probably do a few sessions on it. But for now, This is Grad Con and the CXM Experience, and I'll see you tomorrow.